I'm delighted to have this session with you to talk about the future of education and trends in intergenerational wealth and education expenditure. Well, in these times of fast change, it's important to look to the future and understand these trends. You get a sense of the changing times by looking at the words we're using more. And one word that we're using more than ever is the word unprecedented. In fact, we've seen unprecedented use of the word unprecedented. I saw this on Twitter and I think summed up the sentiment pretty well. Don't know about you all, but I could really go for some precedented times, and we wish for them. But the times we have are fast-moving times. We are living in a VUCA era, which stands for volatility and uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity. And in this context, we wrote a report recently into the future of education, which gave a great sense as to not only the changes we're seeing, but the opportunities we're seeing in this big and fast-growing sector of education. And we wrote in the report, the key characteristic of a leader is foresight. The reason they can see is that they see things not just as they are, but as they will be. And so let's have a look at education in its current state as it is, but also as it will be and the opportunities that it is presenting in investment for Australians. Well, a snapshot of the education sector. There are 4 million school students in Australia across 9,500 schools. Now, 2/3 are in government schools, but 1/3 are in non-government schools. And in fact, by the time we get to secondary schools, more than 40% are in non-government schools. Now, the average fees paid by a parent sending their child to an independent school is $20,000 per child per year. Now, you can see how that adds up and the scale of it in Australia. Now, let's think for a moment about the university sector. There are 1.6 million university students in Australia, and we think, well, aren't a lot of them sort of doing that study part-time while they have a job and pay it off? Well, actually, the majority of students in Australia, the way that we do it here is full-time university for nearly 3 in 4. But isn't the university sector largely overseas students? Well, not at all. Even pre-COVID, just under 1/3 of students were overseas, but 2/3 are domestic students. So it is a big and locally engaged with sector, and it comes at a high price. You've got to add to the university sector the almost 500,000 students that are in the vocational sector at TAFE, or vocational trainers or registered training organisations. Now, you add all of that up, and that is 6.1 million students currently engaged in study in Australia. That is almost a quarter of our total population are students, most of them paying fees. In fact, the total amount we pay in education fees in this nation, just from private sources, is more than $40 billion per annum. So it's a big sector. But let's not just think that students are young people. Let's think about the generations in Australia. There are 6 of them. Now, for a start here, we've got the 20th century generations. Those of us in Generation X or the baby boomers or the builders, we were shaped in the 20th century. And the Australian Bureau of Statistics data shows that we will live longer than generations that went before. We will remain younger longer as well, and will remain active in employment later in life as well. And that means it's not just young people getting educated, but the older generations upskilling, retraining, and career transitioning more than we've ever seen before. And of course, investing in education all the while. But then let's turn to the younger generations who are most likely to be engaged as students. The 21st century generations, generations Y and Z. When we surveyed these students recently for this study, we found that 74% of them believe lifelong learning will be essential for them to future-proof their career. And so education is no longer something that we do at the start of our life, which has to then sustain us for the rest of our life, but something that we plug into throughout our life. In fact, our analysis of today's students shows that these school leavers, have 18 separate jobs in their lifetime, an average tenure of about 3 years per job. They will work later, as we saw, but move across more jobs and also more careers. Every 3 or so jobs, they'll upskill and retrain. And again, the investment in their own education to future-proof their work trajectory is important and expected. Now, this comes at a cost, this elongated time in study, and that's why they're also staying with their parents longer. Not only is housing or affordability a challenge, but their earnings years are pushed back later. And so that's where the bank of mum and dad and the home of mum and dad comes into play. In fact, we have called the stay-at-home 20-somethings the Kippers generation. And that stands for kids in parents' pockets eroding retirement savings. So if the parents can put something aside or have the right financial products to help their children through this time, it is certainly going to serve not only the parents but their children very well. Great nations invest not just in the next innovation, but the next generation. And families, of course, do that as well. They invest in their children because in that is the future. Now, I said 6 generations. We've looked at 5, but we finished up the alphabet with X and Y and Z, and that brings us to Generation Alpha as the latest generation of children, those that are starting their studies or in their primary years, and they are at a whole new level in terms of how society is shaping them. They don't just interact with technology, but of course they wear it. The year that Generation Alpha began being born was 2010. That was the year that the iPad came around and Instagram was launched. And so a little surprised to see youngsters touching any rectangular device. This little girl wondering why the device was not working. Every other device of that shape came to life when she touched it. Must need new batteries or something. They speak to their technology. It's a visual world for them. The world of TikTok, the world of YouTube. In fact, the #1 search engine for young teenagers is no longer Google. They spend longer searching within YouTube because they don't want to read an article on it. They want to watch a video on it. The World Economic Forum came up with this forecast. They said that 65% of children entering primary school today will ultimately end up working in completely new job types that don't yet exist. And so you can see the need to upskill for the future. Now, sometimes we hear statements like this and we wonder whether it will come to pass. Well, think about the school leavers of today. They are now working in jobs that didn't exist when they began their schooling, working in blockchain or as coders, app developers, or in VR, working in social media or as cybersecurity professionals, data visualization and drone pilots, whole new jobs that have emerged in the last decade, and that trend will continue on. But not only will they be working in new jobs and new careers, but in ways that have been transformed just in the last year or so. Working from home has been the biggest transformation to work in a century. It took COVID to be the catalyst to unlock the technologies we have and to decouple work from location. And what that means is that students now, as they move into their future jobs, can actually work remotely and indeed work global jobs even from a local situation. We worried, I think, as employers that maybe the productivity wouldn't be right with our team members working from home. I think we all worried we'd have Homer Simpson's with actual footage of him working from home there. Turned out not to be the case, and productivity was improved in many situations. It also means that study in the future will be hybrid. Will be learn from home just as we can work from home. In fact, today's students said that 70% of students see their ideal learning situation as hybrid. And so this means they'll be able to take courses not just at local universities, but at global ones. Pay the fees, but do the study from their home location. Study from home, work from home, it's something of the future. And I guess that means that teachers will have to get used to the online classrooms. Primary teachers have had the chaos of this sort of situation. Here's my dog, and can I take a selfie? And hey, look at this. It's all chaos. And how contrasted that is to secondary schools. If we've peered in and seen our children in the high school interacting, and it's camera off and mic off, and does make a tough gig for teachers, and university students are engaged in the same way. So interesting, the life stages and how we interact and how that changes. If I was to use 5 words to sum up these emerging generations and their future, I'd say they are digital in the tools that they have, but the opportunities that provides. They're mobile in terms of where they will live and work and study. They're global in the outlook that they have, where they can work and how they can study. Social in the influence channels. That's how they're finding out which courses to take or which campuses to engage with, or for that matter, what brands or products to connect with. It's the social, it's the peer influence. They're consuming content in a visual form, not just a written form. And so for this digital, mobile, social, visual, connected generation, safety professionals are updating safety signs like this one that I saw for them. In case of fire, exit building before Instagramming. And no selfies on the way out, no Facebook updates. Got to keep it safe out there. It's a different generation growing up in a changed world with a different trajectory for their future. We surveyed school leavers recently as they were transitioning from study to earning, and we asked, what are the biggest fears that you face as you move into the adulting stage of life? And financial ones were at the top of the list there. I won't have enough money to live comfortably on, or never being able to buy my own home. And so career and earnings are key for that. But the other three also involve their career outlook, not reaching my full potential, being stuck in a job that I don't enjoy or find fulfillment in, not making a difference with my life. You see, we've got a generation that are investing in their study so that they not only have the right earnings outcome for their financial future, but the right flourishing outcomes so they can find jobs and roles that meet their needs, that are lined up with their aspirations and goals. It's about potential and fulfillment and making a difference with their life. We wrote in this study that to some, work is simply a job, but to many more, it's a lifeline to social interaction, purpose, and a place of belonging. And so that means finding a job, a role, a career with the right workplace culture and the right engaging leadership form. We've got generations now that are investing in study so that they have options to work in a place that'll really help them thrive. They don't want an office situation. If you've seen Michael Scott from The Office, firings will continue until morale improves. Not really a life aspiration to work in a place like that for Generation Alpha. We surveyed today's students and we found that 81% of them feel extremely, very or somewhat equipped by their education to thrive in the workplace in the decade ahead. And so education is future-proofing them. It is delivering what they expect. And the Net Promoter Score, the value that they take, the positivity they have for their education is very high indeed. 94% of students agree that they greatly value having access to an Australian education. They're ticking the box and saying it has delivered what I hoped that it would. And that is a great vote of confidence in what they're paying for and what they're investing in this Australian education. So we've discussed these trends that are transforming their world, where they work and living longer and more careers and job flexibility and global workforce flows and new types of employment, entrepreneurial, new opportunities facing them, an aging workforce and new and emerging structural changes and challenges in their future. What this requires, therefore, for young people growing up amidst these changes is that they be future-proofed. But I guess what we're really saying there is that they be career-proofed. And I guess what that really matters is being skills-proofed. That's what they're looking for. That requires an investment, either from the bank of mum and dad or their own investment. And that's going to require the right sort of products and financial opportunities to meet these essential needs of their lives and their futures. But if they can invest in their education, complete that well, they will have great opportunities to not only survive these changing times, but thrive amidst them. And I'm sure you, as you advise your clients and provide them the right options, will help them flourish and thrive as well. Thanks for listening.